Welcome to the Balanced Blueprints podcast, where we discuss optimal techniques for health and finances and then break it down to create an individualized and balanced plan. I'm your host, John Proper, here with my co-host, Justin Gaines.
So last week we hit the basics of kind of starting the nutrition journey, from eating your food, consciously being present, some entry-level basics, cookings, oils to look for, what to use as far as your basic cooking ingredients, and then if you're not able to cook and you have to eat out. And we tended to focus on the fast food element, so not necessarily a sit-down restaurant, but the same things apply, looking for those specific elements, which if you haven't listened to it yet, you can listen to our last podcast, which will be the part 1 to part 2 today. But we'll continue to go into a little bit deeper on not just oils, but other ingredients and how to make conscious decisions when we're cooking from home.
Sweet. Yeah, the basics. The basics. So you even ended last podcast, something I was thinking about too, with we talk about shop the perimeter of grocery stores.
Right.
So I think that's a great place to start in terms of we can kind of go through a grocery store and that will let us hit different ingredients and we can talk about, what to choose. We can talk about quality of ingredients, what to look for there. And that's just kind of an easy guide because everyone everyone either goes grocery shopping or they scroll through, whatever that Instacart is. So
That's so true. That's so true nowadays. Yeah, you can just scroll through.
I know, I forgot about that. But most people are still, I think, going to the grocery store. And it's even a thing where people enjoy going to like Trader Joe's or something. So
right. Even to get your steps in, even to get your, get some exercise and walk around.
I know. Don't stay on your phone and order food. Yeah. So I think that's a great spot to start because I really want to focus on quality here and how to choose that. Like we said, a big part of it is what can I replace? So we don't want to look at like, let's completely change your lifestyle or you do this, get rid of all that. And here are these new harder habits. It's like, what can we replace? So if you're eating beef, you're still going to eat beef. Let's just swap out for maybe our best option. If you're eating chicken, same thing. Vegetables, same thing. So we'll work down. But
yeah, for sure. Substitutes or replacements instead of elimination.
Definitely. First thing that we'll talk about, and again, I always start at the top because this is what I strive for, is when I go look for food, I'm going to look for seasonal local food. That means, and I know we said grocery stores, but we'll just talk about this a lot quicker and briefly before, because if you're looking to do the ideal thing, you're going to shop at a local farmer's market. These places are going to have food that's grown in your area. You can connect with the farmers. It helps you connect with the food, appreciate it. You're eating what's in season. That's important for health. I've been doing a bunch of research on that. We talked about it I probably talked about it sloppily in an earlier one, but I keep learning more and more about it. So I'm getting more clear on it. But eating food that's grown in your area is very important because it just signals to your body that what season you're in. Vegetables grow based off sunlight. So in the winter now, it's important maybe not to be eating food shipped in from across the world in a different area where it's gorgeous and sunny and 90 while we're living in 20-degree weather. Point being is eating local from a farmer's market is going to be your best bet because you can also get your vegetables there. You can get your meats there. And these are going to be local animals, higher quality, not factory farming. You're supporting places that you can see how they practice. Hopefully they're regenerating the land, doing good practices. And that's going to be your best for your health, the environment's health, and your little local economy. So that's what I strive for. And I'm not perfect on that. So my next step would be trying to find a grocery store, and you can plug in any grocery store you use. It's going to be the same. But for me, when I was in Albany, my favorite grocery store was the local co-op. That's just like a food cooperative, and they're great because it's a grocery store setup. It has everything you need, but most of their produce and dairy and meats do come from local farms in the area. So that's kind of a very nice middle ground of it. It's convenient, easy, maybe a little pricier, but you don't have to go to the farmer's market every week. So I'm going to use them as an example, but whether you're using a local co-op, which would be ideal, Whole Foods, which is probably second best. I know people have their hesitations with it because it is a huge chain owned by Amazon. But the fact of the matter is if they sell local food, which they do often, and they sell good options, it's great for your health. But this even works for Walmart. When we were in college, we shopped at Walmart a ton because they have good options hidden in there as well.
Right.
So,
and if you're on a restricted budget or a fixed income, it's, sometimes you don't have the luxury of spending the extra money on the highest quality or the better name brands. Because unfortunately, in America at least, you have to pay for the highest quality stuff, and typically at exorbitant rates.
Yeah, and that's what's crazy. I mean, even when I spent time in other countries, there's not just huge supermarket stores like this. It's like the local farmers market is the normal thing to do. Like that, people go and they shop for their food outside, and it's great. Throw you samples, you taste stuff. Like it's a whole fun process. It's like when we're traveling, we're like, oh, let's go to the farmers market as an activity, and people there are just like, we're just shopping. Like why is this your daily activity?
Right. Why are you going to the grocery store effectively? It's like,
right.
But I think the other thing too, when you travel, is you find that at least when I've I've only been to Taiwan and Canada, so only out of the country twice, or two different locations at least. Mm-hmm. And generally speaking, Canadian fridges are more like American fridges, but in Taiwan, like the average fridge size was the size of like the average freezer in America. And and I would say the average freezer being, one of your stand up, you have the door for the fridge and you have a door for the freezer. Like that very small section of the freezer was like the average fridge size. Yeah. And they didn't have freezers. Like they just had small fridges. Now they're in a situation there where eating out generally ends up being the same, if not cheaper, than cooking at home. So that's a bit of a different scenario than it is in America. But 100%. You could walk for a half hour and you'd walk by 3 or 4 farmers markets.
Yeah. I think it's that, not to say it's tough, because having a chest freezer in America filled with good quality stuff, because maybe you can't get it often, super great, super beneficial. But I think what you're getting at too, though, is it's normal for people to be shopping more frequently because they're going through fresh food. They're using it up weekly. Things aren't spoiling, they're just turning over what they buy weekly instead of preservative frozen meals that could stay in your freezer for 3 years.
Well, and with a fridge size that amount, I would talk to people, because in Taiwan, believe it or not, a lot of people, the vast majority of people also speak English. So you could have really good conversations with people. And generally speaking, they were going grocery shopping every 2 to 3 days. Yeah. Because it was fresh stuff. And every day there was a farmer's market, and you would walk by several different farmer's markets. And it was just very interesting that typically the average American, they have a freezer or a chest freezer. It's not filled with high quality products. It's filled with TV dinners and, low end products. And that's not, part of it's not even the consumer's fault. Yes, the consumer is the one who made the decision at the end of the day. So, there is some responsibility on the individual for making that decision. But we don't educate America on these things. And we also don't provide the opportunities readily available to be able to make better decisions. We make it very hard to buy a product that is high quality with low preservatives or low inputs. One, because of price, and two, because the way that you can put stuff on labels, stuff that's everyday common products, you can put this crazy name on it, put it on the label, and it sounds terrible, but it's actually not. And then vice versa, you can put something that is terrible, sounds not terrible, and it ends up being like a lot of these rancid oils, they can put on there because, the FDA, I'm going on a rant here, but the FDA only regulates your nutrition label. The rest of, the other 80% of that label can have whatever you say on it, and it doesn't matter.
It's like the word natural.
Natural. Well, even under FDA law, you could put 100 calories on the front. Don't say per serving, just say 100 calories. I actually think you could put 100 calories per serving and then flip it over and the nutrition label says 200 calories per serving. And that's still legal because there's no regulation on what the label actually says. Like I said, I'm going on a rant here, but it's mind-blowing how difficult we make it in this country to get high-quality products from the natural barriers of entry, but also just like the misinformation that is legally allowed because of creative marketing.
That's I know. I want to go down that rabbit hole, but we won't. But we'll save that. That's like a whole episode of, I'd love to compare food in this country versus other country in the food culture. And I'd love to talk about in that same episode, probably just, what's allowed with, through regulation. The FDA, regulation wise. And that goes with the rancid seed oils. This is just a quick one too, of trans fats that are in these hydrogenated, like Crisco vegetable oils, and those are known to be terrible. A sly thing they do, because they're loaded with trans fats that are banned, but they'll say, no trans fat, 0 trans fats per serving. Then they make the serving size under the amount that would have 1 trans fat. So there's no trans fats per serving, but you look at the whole container, there's going to be 4 grams of trans fats, and there should be 0 grams of trans fats in any of our food, except if it comes from a trans fat called CLA, which is in meat, but that's for another day.
Right. We won't go down these rabbit holes.
No. All right.
So back to the grocery store.
On top.
Walk through the doors. We're in the produce aisle. What are we looking for?
Yeah.
We're not aisle. We're in the produce section.
Yeah. Produce section, walking in. Like I said before, hierarchy is seasonal, local produce. So I'm looking for anything grown around me. If your store has a label of it came from this farm, that's great, and we're talking this way step down because it's ideal. If they don't, I would like to play, or I do play a game of like, well, what makes sense? Like, okay, it's not grown near me, but I'm in the dead of winter. Like maybe what I should be eating in this produce section are more winter vegetables, squashes, root vegetables, carrots, parsnips, things of that nature. And I know it's tough, and I'm not saying I don't do it, because you're going to see beautiful tomatoes and citrus fruits. And this is even a big thing. A lot of people comment on my stuff of like, aren't oranges in season, in the winter? I'm like, well, yes, in Florida, like they are. So they're still getting shipped to me. But that's the first thing. I'm going through the produce aisle. I'm looking for local seasonal. If it's not local seasonal stuff that I can't kind of talk to the farmer for, I'm going to always opt for organic. I do like to vouch for it. If price is an issue, I would then recommend going and looking at the list of the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. Each year, a report is put out on like the cleanest fruits and vegetables to buy if you're not going to buy organic, and the dirtiest ones that you should really buy organic. So if you're trying to save money, that's what I would plug there, is the Dirty Dozen and Clean 15 reports. But that's how I'm going to go through. And again, if there's not local stuff, it's winter, I might opt for, if I've gone through the vegetable produce section and there's not really much in season, I'm just talking winter because that's what it is right now, I might go on to the next aisle, which is right near produce on the outside, which is a lot of fermented vegetables. So they'll have like sauerkraut, fermented carrots, and sometimes there will be local brands there. And I think that's a great tool to eat vegetables, because in the winter, my fresh produce does drop a lot. I eat a lot more fat and animal protein. And then like the condiments are going to be more fermented vegetables, because that's great. They grew them in the summer, they fermented them, tons of benefits because it's vegetables. And then also they've been turned into a nice fermented probiotic food. So so that's great in terms of produce. I think that's it. I'm going to look for local grown things. If they're not, I'm going to look for seasonal things. And if I'm going to buy something like that's not in season, I may first want to try, and maybe it's a new food to you, so it's a great thing to try, something fermented. Like I love fermented carrots, sauerkraut. They're great condiments to your meals. And the same goes for like blueberries. I know you were talking about this. If you want blueberries, I think they're a great food to eat. I might go to the freezer section instead and look for, wild blueberries that they picked in the summer and froze, because those are just methods of preserving foods. They've dried food for hundreds of years. They've salted it. We have a freezer now. So I'm not saying I don't eat any summer produce or stuff in the winter. It's just, if I can get it, freeze it, and then use it throughout the winter, that's much better.
Right. And even throughout the summer months, if you have something you really like and you're buying it at the farmer's market, have a test freezer and just freeze it and preserve it yourself. Because then you can buy it in season while it's still good, freeze it, lock in the time frame on that, and then consume it when it's not. Another piece that I kind of want to bring into this, because it's something I am terrible at doing, but I know it's important, is as we go through each section, let's talk about, and it might only really apply to produce and not the rest of them. Well, it'll somewhat apply to meats. But like when I get home with my produce, how should I be taking care of those? How should I be making sure that I lock in the nutrients and I'm not just allowing the nutrients to just dissipate and go away because of breaking down over time, or if there are even organic and natural pesticides on products. Because just because something's organic doesn't mean it doesn't have pesticides and herbicides. It just means it has organic pesticides and herbicides. So how should I be handling that food when I get home to make sure that I'm making it as healthy as possible?
Yeah, great question. A bunch of stuff to break down there. First, just so I don't forget, I want to just say the statement that, freezing your food does not lower the quality. I know a lot of people think it's a way of processing, and I shouldn't say doesn't lower the quality. It's not going to be as good as eating fresh food, but it's not like to the point where it's a preserved food that has preservatives and stuff. It's obviously new technology, but it's not going to hurt your food. Like, I would much rather prefer to eat, if I went to a U-Pick farm, had a great time, picked a ton of blueberries, frozen for the winter, I'm picking that over blueberries that are, flown in from across the country, because those have to be preserved to a sense too, of, while they're being transported, and they usually use chemicals. So I would rather use a freezer, and it's not really going to do a lot to the nutritional value of your food. So that's the first thing. Like you said, that's great. People can do other stuff too. That's really if they're interested in that, but those are all great methods. Well, let's talk about washing first, like you said. So the other thing is, I know it's a big argument, organic versus non. I'm going to choose organic because these organic chemicals, it's a great point you brought up. There's still chemicals, there's still herbicides, pesticides, fungicides. But from what I've seen, since they're organic, the body should be able to process them a little better versus inorganic. And usually we might be getting farther away from it, but when organics first started, it did probably have some more weight on it too. But the farming practices should be a little better. The land practices should be a little better. So that's why I choose to support it. And I just did some research on glyphosate and some other products there that are obviously sprayed on non-organic stuff, and that's going to be a great episode to go into. And those chemicals can be concerning. So I'm going to choose organic. And like we said, look up that list for Clean 15 or Dirty Dozen if you don't want to.
I'll throw something in real quick too on this, since I grew up in the farming background too.
Yeah.
Part of the reason why we push local and at your farmer's market is because a lot of those farms won't be certified organic. But the reason why they're not certified organic isn't because of their practices or what they're using. A lot of those local farms, and especially the small ones, are doing everything organic would do. It's just they don't want to pay the money to get the certification, because the amount of money that they would pay for their certification, they wouldn't be able to make a profit on their farms. So when you're in the grocery store, certified organic matters. When you're at the farmer's market, that's the luxury of being able to talk to the farmer and just ask the question, do you use these products? Do you not use these products? What are you putting on your foods? And what I always tell people to ask, and is kind of the telltale sign whether you take them up on it or not, is, would you be open to me coming and visiting the farm? If they say no, to me, giant red flag. Every farmer that I know, and part of my financial planning and insurance business, we insure a ton of farms. I would say that almost, if not every single farm that I insure, welcomes guests and wants them to come and just be educated on what's going on. And a farm that's not welcoming to that probably is doing something that they don't want you to see. And that's why they don't want you there. So certified organic in the grocery store, very important. But when you're doing the local farmers market, they may not have it, but a lot of times they are doing those same practices. They're just not paying the $5,000 to $15,000 for the organic certification.
Yeah. I mean, so many good points that just excite me. It just brings up a million things. And just to comment on that stuff too, the first thing that jumps out to me is it can be daunting. You are going up to a farmer's market and a farmer, and that's their job, and you don't want to be rude, but at the same time, you're the customer. It's okay. Ask questions, and like Justin said, if they're being weird, if they're being rude, and you even get to the point where you ask to see their farm and they say no, there's other vendors. In a world of so many options too, I think it's great to learn to vet people, because otherwise you're just walking around thinking, man, they're selling apples, who do I buy from? It's like, buy from someone who's kind, who gives out the information and has nothing to hide. So I know it can be daunting at first, but I think that goes into, when we're talking about overall health here, like, hey, you build people skills too. Like, that's an important part of health. Like, go to the farmer's market, talk to people, you're not just scrolling on your phone and, buying those things through Instacart. Like, you're getting people skills, you're getting fresh air. That's another thing. The other thing is, I know people think farmers markets are generally always more expensive, and that's not the case all the time because of those farms that are doing great practices, but maybe can sell it cheaper than if you have to buy your organic apples from the store. They're going to upcharge it because they're organic, whereas maybe a local place can sell them to you for a little cheaper because they're organic, but they're not paying for that. And farmers aren't rolling in cash. Like, I know we like to really hate on the big ones because they probably are the huge factory farms that control things. But these small local farms, I would never hate on them for not being certified organic if they're doing good practices. Because if you can go to the farm to see how things are made, great. If you can go to the farm to see how hard the work is and how little they make, also great.
Right. No, for sure.
Yeah. All right. What were we?
Washing vegetables when we get home.
It's too many good things to talk about. I would choose either water and diluted white vinegar or water and baking soda. I think I've seen a lot of hate on the internet. There's a whole account, which is wild, for an Instagram person who just washes his produce when he gets home. Like hundreds of thousands of dollars. Insane. But I think he washes with vinegar and baking soda. And a lot of people just hate on it because they're like, it neutralizes it. You don't. So I would do one or the other. I have to look into that more.
I was going to say, do you know if there's facts?
I don't know. But I know he gets a lot of hate. And I have heard people say, yeah, you should use one or the other. I should get better about washing my vegetables and produce. Local vegetables and produce, I don't as much because even though this sounds a little weird and gross, if there's a little dirt, there's a little stuff on it, like, it's kind of good for you. I might wipe them clean versus scrub them clean with soap and water because there's a lot of microbes. I was just doing research that we'll talk about on another day, but a lot of bacteria that comes from the earth, the soil, where it's been. So again, this is strictly farmers market talk, but if you're getting carrots that look like they got some dirt in them because they were picked that morning, or mushrooms or beets, like, that's great. Like, wipe them clean, maybe get a dry brush, but you don't need to sterilize it with Dawn soap and, chlorinated water. Like, that is good for you. It's not going to harm you.
Okay.
But yeah, in terms of grocery store, your goal is to get like gross chemicals off of it. They may even sell stuff like an organic cleanser. You can look into that, but I would probably let them soak in vinegar. That gets bugs off too. I know that's a concern with farmers markets. So if people want to get bugs out, soak it in vinegar water, it's going to get them out.
Perfect.
Storing it, right?
Yeah, storing it too, right? Yeah.
Yeah. That one's tough where I don't know all the answers. So I'll just be open and honest about that. But all of the answers are on the internet. I know herbs, the best thing you can do is like put them in a mason jar in water as if it's a fresh plant and put a small clear bag over it, which is a pain because it takes up a lot of space in your fridge. But the roots are still getting water. They're covered. So I don't think they're getting too much oxygen. So like herbs like parsley, probably fresh rosemary, dill, thyme if you have big bushels, cilantro. That's what you're going to want to do for those. Lettuce, I'm pretty sure you're supposed to really wash, spin, dry. You don't really want a lot of water on it. Wrap it in a paper towel and then store that in the drawer. Your fridge has two different drawers, one being usually low humidity, one being high humidity. Fruits and vegetables go in one of those. You're going to have to look that up just because I don't want to give the wrong information. But they usually have on the fridge too the like little apple picture or like
right, the symbols for you to put your stuff in there. Yeah.
But like that's what you would do for lettuce. Wash it, dry it good, wrap it in a towel. And that's what I do for a lot of my produce too, that usually it gets wrapped in a towel, then put in that crisper drawer. The reason I don't know this stuff too is because I've just thought about another thing is there's other things where you don't want to store this food with this food because it releases this gas, which makes this vegetable, spoil quicker. So there's a lot of stuff to know there. I think long as, and you asked what's the best way to do it. So I want, bring those things up because
it's funny too, because I was thinking it was like a very simple
I know.
and it's I didn't know all of this stuff that you're saying, oh, it's just the surface level and these are the little things, and I'm like, I didn't know any of this.
I know, but that's the thing is I don't do any of that also, and that because I don't know it, because if I'm buying my food grocery store or farmer's market, I planned out my meals and I'm eating it in a week, I'm not too concerned. Not to say that it's not important to store your food and keep the nutritional value the best you can, but I'm just not at that stage yet. It's not my full-time job. If it was my full-time job of like, that's all I had to do was cook and do this, I'd probably look more into it. So I don't think most people will be there, but I think the important thing to know is if you do the main items like lettuces, because those go bad quick, you wash them, you wrap them, you put them in the fridge, you clean your vegetables, and you just keep them in a drawer, maybe separate from other foods, you're gonna be good to go.
Gotcha.
Tomatoes, though, that's one easy thing is like, don't store tomatoes in the fridge. There's some things that people do store in the fridge that you don't want to, and you can look those up too, because they're like a shocking surprise. Like, oh, I always stored that in the fridge, and it makes it spoil quicker. So.
Interesting. Yeah. We've been through produce, so now we're going into seafood, which you probably want to do on its own because that has its own rules.
Yeah.
And then we'll go into red meat, white meat, and then over to dairy.
Yeah, and I think this will be quicker because produce is a little more
straightforward.
It's the start. So the same rules apply here. I'm looking for local seasonal meat. Same rules all apply for the farmer's market, and the same reasons why. We won't go over that again. If they have local farms and they're selling it in the store, whether that's beef, chicken, whatever, that's great. So things that are a little more specific, we'll start with meats. I'm always going to pick red meat over white meat. I know this is very contradictory to what has been pushed towards us, but mainly that's because for the longest time, the research, again, a whole nother episode on saturated fat, but saturated fat has been demonized. That is not the case in terms of, we should not be eating it or we should be avoiding it for our health. That's not the case. So white meat, I always call the inferior meat. If you're going to choose chicken, I would always start with dark meat. Dark meat is more dense in the vitamins and minerals it has and more mitochondria it has because it's the working meat. So that's why it's actually darker. I know it grosses some people out, but it's actually juicier, more tender, tastes better. So if I was going to choose chicken, turkey, I would choose dark meat there. And even if I don't want to do that yet, I think you can they're starting to sell like darker meat of chicken, like ground dark meat chicken. So fattier cuts there is a great introduction. But that would be my second choice too. Ideally, we'll go even a step into the most ideal, wild game meats, venison, elk, bison, things like that. But they're pretty expensive unless you're hunting. So they're very expensive in the grocery store, but those are great meats, usually leaner cuts of red meat. Not to say that the fat on it is bad, but just because they're wild animals grazing, it's more of a nutrient dense meat. Then I would go into your typical beef. I would look for, we'll talk about quality here, pasture raised. We want it to be living outside pretty much, ideally all of its life. It's going to get sunshine. It's going to get some grass in there. I know we obviously go back and forth here. I like grass-fed, grass-finished as my ideal, not to say that you can't find, and I know obviously Justin's background, this happens with him, and farms I found that even do grass-fed pretty much 90% of their life, and then they'll finish them on, I found farms that even finish them on grains they grow themselves, like organic grains they grow themselves.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm never going to tell someone, don't eat that meat because it's not grass-fed, grass-finished. That's still a great quality meat. These may sound like tiny little things we're going on about of like, well, why does it really matter? And you said something of, if it's part of your everyday diet. And that's where I think it is important, and it's not small, because meat for me, and I think it should be for most people, unless there's reasons to take it out for maybe healing like low stomach acid, but meat should be a staple of your everyday diet, meat and seafood. It's going to be your highest quality form of protein, the right ratio of amino acids. And that's why I know these things, and we probably go into them a lot more than you do have to, but they are important because this is a staple food in the diet. And like I was talking about earlier, I'm going to choose red meats over chicken. because, I phrase it that way because I'm eating it every day, which may throw people through a loop, and we can talk about another time. But, I say I'm going to choose this over chicken because I'm not eating it once or twice a week. Then it might be like, well, I'm choosing them the same. I'm eating chicken once a week and beef. I'm eating, red meat every single day. So that's when I say I'm choosing this over that because it's such a staple. So my go-to would just to find, an organic grass-fed, grass-finished beef in a grocery store. Like we're talking about, even Walmart has this at a great price because it's going to be raised, better than conventional. If we're at a farmer's market, you can talk to the farmer. You can see if they're finished on grain, because even if that's something you like for flavor profile, that's fine because they could be using great grains, their own grains, which is awesome, which I've seen. I'll just wrap up because it'll take 2 seconds. Seafood, very similar. I'm going to look for local seafood, wild caught. Look into it. Local seafood at your farmer's market is harder to find. So I'll look for things grown in or farmed, caught in the Northeast. It might not be from my lake down the road, but good farming practices.
What do you consider local? Like obviously we say local all the time, but what's that look like?
It depends what I can get. I mean, fruit and veg in my
50,
city.
50.
20.
Oh, okay. Like 20 miles.
Yeah. Because that should be doable. Meat, same thing, but I'll maybe reach out to like Albany to Syracuse. Like that's 100 miles or so.
100 roughly 100-mile radius.
Now seafood, I'll be like Chesapeake Bay, so.
Okay. So like 300 miles.
Yeah.
Roughly. Yeah.
Because ideally we'd live right on a nice spot where you can get good local produce and access to water, but we're a little farther. There might be people fishing around. If I went fishing, I could get local. So there's not really a huge excuse, but I hunt. I don't fish that much. So I could get a lot more local fish, but that's what I would, look for in terms of seafood is it coming from your area of water that's closest to you instead of New Zealand, China, So just to cap that off, seafood is similar. Look for wild caught, look into the sourcing. It's important. You kind of have to do your own work there. If you can find like in the case at the grocery stores, if they have seafood that tells you where it comes from, get the closest one if it's wild caught, and don't be afraid of frozen. Frozen seafood's great. Same thing. They flash freeze it. So right away preserves a lot of the nutrient value. And that might be a lot better than, I know some of that seafood in the case looks good, looks fresh, but farm raised, not great conditions. A bag of wild caught frozen seafood might be actually a much better choice.
Got it. Perfect.
But yeah, we will go into the rest of the store.
Yeah, we can do a part 3 where we hit. So it'd be dairy, frozen food, and then the rest of the store.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to our podcast.
We hope this helps you on your balanced freedom journey.
Please share your thoughts in the comments section below.
Until next time, stay balanced.